There is a deeply ingrained cultural expectation that financial security begins the day you buy your own home. The drivers behind this are primarily emotional. We want a customized space where we can modify the structure and operate entirely outside the control of a landlord. But the emotional picture rarely matches the physical and economic reality of modern real estate markets. Look at the contrast here between the aging, weathered structures and the new high-rises pushing into the skyline above them. To make a sound choice, we must look past the sentiment and check the math. A primary residence must be evaluated entirely as an asset allocation decision. This schematic breaks down the structure of homeownership. The first variable is capital lockup. Next is amortized interest, the premium paid to a bank to leverage the purchase. Finally, maintenance depreciation, the constant cash outflow required to stop the physical asset from decaying. By analyzing these GRI variables, we can mathematically test whether a mortgage builds wealth or if leasing is the superior strategy for capital efficiency. This split-screen model allows us to directly compare the two paths. On the left is Model A, mortgage-backed acquisition. The entry fee for this model is the down payment, which typically demands a large chunk of your current net worth. Once deployed, that money is hit with an immediate opportunity cost. It can no longer generate yield in the broader financial markets. Then comes the cost of leverage. To finance the rest of the asset, you take on an equated monthly installment, or EMI. Notice how this monthly payment is actually distributed. During the early years of a typical mortgage, the majority of that cash goes straight to the bank as interest. It buys very little equity. Furthermore, ownership makes you fully liable for the physical reality of the structure. You must factor in an annual carrying cost of 1 to 2% of the property's total value just to cover structural maintenance and taxes. During its first decade, a mortgage functions primarily as a wealth drain to service capital costs rather than a reliable equity generator. Now we shift focus to the right side of our ledger, Model B, leasing. The primary out-of-pocket cost here is predictable, your monthly rent. Aside from a security deposit, which is a minor and temporary opportunity cost, your broader capital reserves remain untouched and liquid. To evaluate exactly what you are paying for, we use the equation on screen. Take your annual rent and divide it by the total asset value. This gives us the rental yield. This specific ratio dictates the cost of renting relative to the property's actual purchase price. In the Indian market, this metric is structurally suppressed. Residential rental yields average between 1 and 3%. Compare that yield to the cost of leverage. A home loan can easily cost 8 or 9% in interest. This discrepancy exists because of rapid urban expansion. Look at the massive supply-side reality of these incoming residential towers. This volume of inventory keeps rental prices highly competitive. Because rental yields sit lower than loan interest rates, mathematics dictates that leasing costs less than borrowing. Let's test this equation on a high-value asset. This 3D block represents a luxury property in Gurgaon, carrying a 5 crore rupee valuation. It is a 4-bedroom complex with top-tier security and comprehensive lifestyle amenities. If you choose to rent this exact property, your monthly cost is approximately 55,000 rupees, inclusive of maintenance. Extrapolating that out, the tenant's annual cash outflow is roughly 6.6 lakh rupees. Apply our rental yield formula to this specific scenario. The tenant pays an annual yield of just 1.2% of the total asset base. Even assuming steady inflation and rent hikes, a tenant could live in this property for a full century before their payments equaled the original purchase price. At this tier, the owner absorbs the capital lockup and depreciation, while the tenant buys access to the same lifestyle for a fractional fee. To see how this affects mid-career professionals, this dual ledger animation compares the same 50 lakh rupee property under both models. On the acquisition side, assume you hand over a 10 lakh rupee down payment and take a 40 lakh loan over 20 years. That generates a monthly obligation of roughly 35,000 rupees. But look at the interest component. Roughly 30,000 of that EMI is pure interest going to the bank. Now switch to the leasing ledger. We will apply a standard 2% rental yield to that exact same 50 lakh property. The renter's entire monthly obligation is only 8,500 rupees. Put these sunk costs side by side, 30,000 in interest versus 8,500 in rent. Neither payment builds equity. By leasing, the tenant generates a capital surplus of 21,500 rupees every single month. That is liquid capital that can be diverted into high-yield alternative investments like mutual funds. Reinvesting that rent to interest surplus mathematically outpaces the slow equity generation of early mortgage payments. The ledger math proves the inefficiency, but the implications extend into your career trajectory. This introduces the concept of the liquidity mobility premium, the strategic value of remaining financially agile. Look at this career timeline. Taking on a heavy mortgage between ages 25 and 50 creates a liquidity trap right during your highest growth phase. It restricts your risk tolerance. With a large fixed liability, you cannot comfortably pivot to a new industry or take an entrepreneurial leap. It also impacts your geographic mobility. A property anchors you, often making it difficult to accept lucrative out-of-city opportunities. Urban environments expand rapidly, as shown by these massive new towers dwarfing the unfinished structures nearby. Being physically tied to a single neighborhood in a developing city is a career liability. There is a correct time to buy a house, but it requires meeting 3 absolute trigger conditions. Condition 1. Absolute geographic stability. You expect no career relocations for the foreseeable future. Condition 2. You can clear the down payment without touching your emergency reserves or cannibalizing your high-yield portfolios. Condition 3. The resulting EMI represents a small enough fraction of your total income that it will not constrain a professional pivot. Until those strict criteria are met, leasing preserves capital efficiency and maintains absolute operational freedom.